backdrop. When do you normally end? Sorry, it's 11:30. What? 1? Oh, it's revival. That's 1. That's spoken by somebody who has older kids. So they can go home on their own. So, so funny you say that. When we were in Kamloops, I'll just say, there was a season for like 9 months where it was unbelievable. Like services were like 5 hours long. We just never went home. It was like church was at, what was it, 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon? And so nobody had like the hungry lunch thing. And so you could all last until 6 o'clock, and it just never ended. It just like hours and hours, and people never relented. So I'm in. I'm into revival. Like I would love to set the captives free. So, but as we, I just thinking about Christmas, and it is the Christmas season. And I don't know if it's, for whatever reason, this is the season we actually maybe we give more attention to thinking about Jesus, and it's not right, because now, in this season, generally, we read the Christmas story or whatever, and it makes us more than at any other time to actually think about Christ, or the birth of Christ, or the story, and we hear it, whether it's Christmas songs, you hear it constantly, it's going and it's reminding you about Jesus. And I don't know if that's right. Like every season is Jesus' season. And so, but we seem to, Christmas does it more than at any other time. And then Easter. Last week, I was listening to a message from a friend of ours who was speaking, and he was just talking about the Christmas story a bit. And he goes, man, like, has it become too familiar? Like, is the story too familiar where we have lost the awe of the story? Because often we read the story and we know the ending. And we read the story knowing the ending. And he goes, but like, have we lost it? Because it is profound, this story. It changed humanity. And does it actually change us today, here and now? Not the day I got saved where I go, Jesus stepped in. But I long to be changed every day. Growing to be more like Jesus. And so I want to look just quickly at this story a little bit. And just if I were to put a title on this or whatever, it'd be the journey of worship. And it kind of has been our journey where I'm like, not so much just strictly worship like, Sunday morning or youth or songs of worship, but Romans 12, I present myself as a living sacrifice. This is my worship. And so we've tried to actually live that, going that. When we are loving our neighbors, this is our worship. When we are doing what we do, this is my worship. And so when I'm following Jesus, this is my worship. And so I think we could focus on, there's any number of points in Matthew 2, 1-12. There's any number of themes and points and directions you could pull out of this. And I just want to look quickly kind of at the journey of worship and how it's lived out and what truth means and how we respond to truth. And so with that, if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Matthew 2, 1-12. I'm sure everyone has their Bibles this morning. Sorry, there's no PowerPoint, and let's just read the 12 verses together, and we'll see how far we push through them. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi, wise men from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who is to be born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they asked. Judah. They replied, "For this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be my shepherd, my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. It's a profound story. It was life-altering then, and it's life-altering now. It is a story that actually needs to impact our heart again and again and again. And as I read the story, I try to understand, imagine, because we actually know the end of the story when we begin it, but imagine being there and knowing the prophecies and watching it come to life. It would be riveting. It would be unbelievable. You know, and the other account, if you look in the other gospel about the account, there's angels, the choir of angels. I mean, it would be life-altering then, and it should, and it needs again and again to change my perspective as I go through life. And I found myself reading the words of Isaiah 55:8. My thoughts are nothing like your thoughts. My ways are nothing like your ways. And as I start looking at the last 15 months that we have walked through, I go, yeah, that's pretty accurate. But I long that my ways and my thoughts would line up with the ways and thoughts of Jesus. And I long that we would line up with the ways and thoughts of Jesus this Christmas season. And I'm so thankful that we can look back over the last 15 months and actually see at times how we've actually hit the heart of God and we've stepped into it and we go, that was your ways. That was your thoughts. And yes, we did it. Because that's how we're designed and created to live life. You know, and it's a real benefit when we actually line up our life according to God's truth. There's times in life I most certainly have not lined my life up in the ways of Jesus. It's not a great benefit to my life. But when we do line up our lives, the benefits are amazing. And it's amazing how gracious God is, because there's times we stumble into it. I know at times I have stumbled into what God wants me to do, and suddenly I find myself that there's times I've studied and I've prepared and it's been revealed to me. And there's other times that God has just spoken clearly and I get to follow even though I might not understand. And it is a benefit to follow Jesus and to embrace the truth. And in John 8:32, I think a lot of people would know this. John 8:32, it says, know the truth and the truth will set you free. The problem is that is not completely accurate, because the verse above it, it says, if you hold to my teachings, then you will be my disciple. And if you do that, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So it's not just about if you know the truth, because everyone in this society and in culture, they go, that is my truth, and now I am free. And it's not right. There's this need to actually hold on to the teachings of Jesus so we will be a disciple, so we know truth, and we can be free and set others free. There's this need and desire within our lives as believers, but there's a need and desire within society. To be honest, I think the church is more essential and more needed in culture and society now than at any time in history. Not a building sitting on the corner, but people who are passionately taken with Jesus so much so they leave here and they go, let me tell you about Jesus. I've known freedom and you need it. And our neighbor didn't know she needed freedom. There was something in her life, but when you start talking about Jesus, and we can see people and go, you need freedom. They're like, what do you mean? You need freedom. We who are free have the opportunity to set the captives free. We who know truth, go step out and share truth. And as we look at this story, oh boy, we're running out. There's a lot of different ways. So I just want to look at a few points in here. So these wise men who came from the east, there's not tons written on them. Different scholars and people say, maybe they came from Persia, India, They most certainly were astrologers. They studied the stars. It's hard to say they followed a star. People are like, well, was it a normal star? Was it a bright star? The reality is it was supernatural. It was supernatural. A star that shows up and leads and stops and disappears and then comes back. It's God going, hey, I'm going to speak to you in a way that you are going to be captured, and I'm going to lead you where you need to go. So these wise men who studied the stars went on a journey. And how profound is this, that these guys they knew the scripture. In some context, they had studied something because they understood. They saw a star and they go, we need to go worship a king. I'm like, I wish it was like that with me sometimes. But for somewhat, I just have to ask more questions and more questions and more questions. And we complicate things. These guys go, oh, there's a star. Oh, there's a new king. Let's go for a walk. And the walk was like 1,000 miles long, 1,200 miles long. Let's get on our camel and go for a journey. And I was challenged because imagine if we knew the scriptures and we understood the coming king was coming and he's going to be in Armstrong and he's coming on this day. Are we willing to go? And some of us like, well, it's raining. I don't want to drive on the highway. And we have all sorts of reasons at times why we don't follow Jesus. And these guys who actually weren't even believers said, we're going. And they went on this journey and started following this star. And they ended up coming, and I love in verse 2, they show up, and they're meeting with Herod, and they ask. They have one question, one observation, and one declaration that they're going to live out. And they go, where is the newborn king? Where is he? We saw his star. This king has a star. No other king's has a star. This one has it. We saw it rise, and we're here, and we've come to worship him. That's all they say. They said, we've come, this is our declaration. We're here to worship him. I love that statement. It's not like he shows up at Herod and goes, just tries feeling it out. Like oftentimes, and we do this, we try to feel out the situation before we go, oh yeah, I can talk about Jesus here. They're open to it. Like we feel things out. These guys just show up and they go, hey, we're here to worship the king. Where is he? Where is he? And imagine coming to church or going to youth or going into your neighborhood with that conviction. Coming to church with the conviction of, oh, I guess they're going to sing. I guess I'm going to worship. It's like, I'm going to encounter the living God when I walk in here. And not showing up hoping it happens, showing up going with boldness, I come before the throne of grace. I am going to come face to face with a God who loves me desperately enough to heal and to save me and restore my life and empower me to step into my neighborhood and do likewise. And I think I look and I go, oh, that's the boldness and conviction I want in my life. That's what I want. The problem here is Herod is the king. And these guys are talking about a new king. And kings in those days, they demanded worship, they expected worship, and they would kill anyone who stood in the way of their worship. And I don't know if these wise men bowed down to Herod, but I do know this. They walked into his presence and said, where's the newborn king? Which would have been scary. Most of us we don't really get that culture in that context. The reality is they just killed people that they disagreed with. And if you said there's a new king, they'll just kill you. And I love that in the face of fear and opposition, they lived their truth. And I look at my own life sometimes going, man, how often does fear steal my faith? How often do the things that I'm scared about actually keep me from doing what God desires me to do? And I would ask you, how many times in life does fear actually keep you from stepping out in the faith that God has placed in your soul to do? And what you know you're supposed to do, but certain fears and opposition go, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm going to test the waters. And we need to step out in boldness. And there's Herod was not a Jewish king. He was placed there by the Roman Empire. And this statement, we've come to search for a newborn king, would have sunk him because there's over 300 prophecies. So whether it's in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7, Isaiah 11, Jeremiah, Numbers, and Micah 2, the prophecies are being fulfilled. And the interesting thing was Herod's officials and all his teachers of the law, they knew the prophecies. They knew exactly where the Jewish king was supposed to be born. They knew where Jesus was going to be born. They were too chicken to tell Herod. And imagine this, knowing where Jesus was going to be born and you never went. Like the most impacting thing on the planet Earth, and you chose not to go. It's crazy to me. I hope, like, if I was in those days, I hope I would have done anything to get to the birth. If you knew what was happening, you go, this guy's going to save humanity and change the face of our world forever. I'm like, I would hope my heart would go, I want to go. And I hope my heart is the same way today when I go, Jesus, what are you doing? I want to do what you're doing. And I'll move and whatever's in my way to go and do it. And so Herod is disturbed. It says he's disturbed in verse 3. And like other egocentric and narcissistic kings, he has to rile everyone else up. So all of Jerusalem is disturbed with him because it's no fun just to be angry by yourself. It's way better if you can get everyone else angry with you. So it makes you feel like really important. And so he stirs up all Jerusalem. They're disturbed with him. And I start thinking about it. Why are they disturbed? Well, one, Herod is the king and he wants to keep his kingship. Two, he's disturbed so I would say, why are we disturbed by Jesus? Well, because when Jesus shows up, he invites us to draw close to him. And what does it do? It often reveals things that aren't close to him. And we have the opportunity to have sin and problems removed from our life. And it's disturbing to us at times when things get pointed out. And we have the opportunity to go, oh, you're so loving. Yeah, let's move those things out. But if we want to hold on to those things, then the truth of God is disturbing. And we get upset because we like to hold on to our stuff. And God goes, I want to set you free. And so Herod was really disturbed because life was about to change as he knew it. And he didn't like it. He was disturbed by the truth. And Herod had the opportunity. He could have embraced it. I don't think he could have. I don't know, it doesn't talk about how, his heart or anything. But had he gone, you know what? I'm going to read the prophecies. I'm going to embrace the prophecies. It probably would have changed his entire country. But kings in those days, that's not what they did. They fought to keep their kingdom. They'll do anything to keep their kingdom. And we know that he was a merciless, rebellious king because at the end of the story, we know he killed all the boys 2 years and under. He had a problem. He was a wicked king, and he did not bow his knee to the truth. In fact, he tried to kill the truth. He didn't want to be set free from it. He tried to eliminate it and be the truth himself. And I look at my own life and I go, do I do that in my own life? I read the truth, and do I actually try to bury the truth and live my own truth, or am I willing to let the truth of this story set me free? And I'd ask you the same thing. So in verse 4, they have a meeting. They come together. All of Herod's leaders, they know exactly. They know Micah 5:2. They actually tell him Micah 5:2. And for whatever reason, they've never told him before. It doesn't say so. They don't actually embrace it. And there's just this, it's just sad. Imagine knowing Jesus is going to be born and not actually doing anything about it. And for those of us who have embraced Jesus' life, I would say, imagine having this truth and actually we don't do anything with it. And I'm not saying you don't at all. I'm looking at my own life, and I'm looking at my wife sharing in our neighborhood, and I'm going, do I actually share the truth that sets the captives free? And I want to. I need to. And the leaders in verse 6, they recite back to him, about Jerusalem, or about Bethlehem, and you are not least around among the ruling cities, for from you a ruler will come who will be the shepherd to my people Israel. And Herod is faced again with the truth, and do I step into it? Herod called for a private meeting, which seems to happen when people are disturbed. They don't want an open meeting. They're like, let's have a very private meeting. And so he had a private meeting with the Magi, and I don't know how that meeting went. I would have loved to sit in some of those things because it's been really interesting to see how these guys wrestle through. One, Herod doesn't know Jesus or isn't a believer, doesn't conform to that, nor do the Magi. But the Magi are actually trying to follow the star. And so that would have been an interesting conversation. And then in verse 8, Herod says one of the most profound things in verse 8 that I think is actually so important for us. He says, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so I can worship too." And we know he didn't want to go worship, but he says, go search carefully for the child. And it's an encouragement this season. Search carefully for Jesus. I think it's a great word to go, do we search carefully for Jesus? Do we search and look for Jesus? Or do we just glaze over the story and we know the ending as we begin reading it? And I go, I want to search carefully for Jesus. I want to look for him. How do I see Jesus? And so, we're done. Where's the worship guy? Who is it, Jim? Where's Jim? Just a guitar. Just one guitar. No banjo, guitar. So, we'll play the banjo later. Sorry. You give a microphone to somebody, that's what happens. So, and I can say, I think at times, and I can look at my own life, I haven't always given the most care to my pursuit of Jesus. I'm saved. I get to go to heaven. That's awesome. But do we carefully invest in our relationship? Or do we carefully search for Jesus? How careful are we with our walk with Jesus? And I think it's a call this holiday season. More than at any other time, we focus on Jesus. More than any other time in the year, we read these stories, we see lights, and it just reminds us, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And it's this call to actually carefully search for the King and examine our own heart. Remove things in our life that are actually not healthy for us. King Herod had some really unhealthy things, and instead of going, hey, I actually want to move these, he became disturbed, and it actually was really bad for him, and then he killed a whole pile of people. Herod spoke of worship, said, I want to come worship. And it was under a cloak of religious, deceptive, demonic words that he tried to infiltrate that holy moment so he could actually end a life. And there is a need that we would worship and just keep coming back to this journey that we've been walking. And I love worship. I love the opportunity to actually speak and proclaim truth and sing it out. But in today's age, there is a need like no other that we would live our lives as a living sacrifice. And this is our worship, and that our neighbors would open doors, and that people don't need to hear us speak. They need to look at our lives and go, there's something different, and I want what you have. And we've all had those moments. I've had them. I've watched people. I've looked. When I was in Bible school, I looked and said, I want what you got. And to be honest, this community needs what you have. They need what you have. They don't know it. Some of them just need to be told about Jesus. And for whatever reason, we often are scared and we stop. And so I'm not sure, there's so much more. I'm not sure how Jesus has been leading you. I actually think Jesus speaks to everyone all the time, and I just don't always hear him. I'm not sure how he's leading you, but my great encouragement is to you, follow the star. Follow Jesus. It's a risk. Believe me, we're in the middle of a risk. We're right in the middle of it. John Wimber spelled faith R-I-S-K. So I'm not even saying risk. I'm just saying live in faith. That's what Jesus said. Live the faith that he's put in you. And if I were to ask, I bet you if I asked, how many of you right now know something God's asking you to do and you haven't done it? I bet tons of people would put their hands up going, there it is. Like people would go, this is what I know I'm supposed to do, but for whatever reason, this and this and this and this stand in the way. I would say it is time to follow the star and follow the promptings of the Spirit and step out in faith and share the hope of Jesus this Christmas season with a community and your neighbors that desperately need life because they're disturbed on the inside. They need Jesus. And so these wise men entered the house, and they bowed down and they just began to worship. And I don't know what that looked like. It would have been really interesting because they've come from the east, and I'm sure there's different forms of worship. And they bowed down and they worshiped Jesus. And then they gave these gifts that were profound and prophetic in nature. You know, gold represents the king, and there's frankincense used in priestly duties, and myrrh and embalming ointment. And so I just love that at the birth of Christ, he was drawing all nations unto himself. And that's what we're called to do this Christmas season, share Jesus. That all nations would come unto him. Maybe the nations in your neighborhood, it's 2 of your neighbors. Go share Jesus. And so what we want to do, we want to take communion this morning. And so you check your own heart. But I think there is this real amazing moment that we've come to looking at the story. And please read it more. There's so much more in there than I ever touched on. And just go, Jesus, I want to follow you. I long that the life and the story of Jesus would not be just familiar. And I'm like, oh, I know the story. But I want to be familiar with Jesus, but I want to be taken with amazement on a regular basis because of my King. And that's us. And so let's, just in your own places, you're sitting here, we all have people who don't know Jesus, who need to know Jesus. And so let's just take a moment and just be willing. God, I give my heart to you again this Christmas season. I want to embrace this story, and I want to see the story of Jesus lived out in whatever your context, your job, your neighborhood, your family, wherever you're at. Wherever you have influence, let's bring the Jesus story. And then we're going to invite people to come for communion and step into this life-altering story again and to remember what Jesus has done for us. And so let's just take a minute, just on your own, just think and say, God, search me, know me. Jesus, we love you. First and foremost, we give our hearts to you again and again and again. And I just say thank you so much for this story, but this life that you have invited us into. God, and we ask that it would impact us. It would change how we live life again and again because we draw close to Jesus. And we ask that this season we would find ourselves in worship in a way we've never. God, and I do ask that we would be able to give gifts to the King like we've never done. Whether it is our heart, whether it is our mind, we would give gifts to Jesus. We would step out in faith, push past fear, and run after you. And so, God, we, again, just commit to following Jesus. Say, amen. Commit to following Jesus. And so, God, we thank you for your birth and for what you've done and how you lived. And we thank you for your death and for how it has set us free. Your resurrection set us free. everything you do, Jesus, is you long for us to hear and know your truth and walk in freedom, not only for eternal life, but for the here and now to be free. And so, God, we thank you for the way you lived life, and I say, help us to live that way. Help us to live life like Jesus. And so we're just going to open the communion tables. You can come, and if you would like prayer, there will be some people who would love to pray with you and hear your stories and just listen and encourage you as you step into what God is calling you to step into this Christmas season. So communion's being opened up. You can come on up and take communion.